So first of all, I'm a vascular biologist. I study blood vessels. And so I know a lot about lectins because lectins are very important for the integrity of our circulation. In fact, lectins are kind of the super glue that holds our tissues together. If you didn't have lectins, you'd literally fall apart. Okay. Like you would just like like literally you'd fall apart. So lectins are actually part of who we are. And there are hundreds of different kinds of lectins. And yeah, there are a few of them that are in fact poisonous. All right. But there's a whole mythology, okay, about lectins and their toxicity that once again, I'm sure somebody well intentioned started to put together the facts. And then it started to snowball into essentially an urban legend that got spread everywhere. And we know when you talk about lots of people being aware of lectins, what they're aware of the narrative behind lectins. But they're not really yet informed on the science behind lectins because most people don't know that without lectins, they fall apart. Okay. So let me kind of tell you, I'll try to condense this into something that I think your listeners and viewers will actually remember. Tomatoes are one of the culprits because it's got lectins and it's part of the nightshade family. Ooh, nightshades are deadly. Deadly nightshade. Got to stay away from that. Okay. And the lectins are deadly as well. And tomatoes are poisonous, right? Got to stay away from them. Let me give you a little historical fact because I'm a big believer to understand our present and our future. It's very helpful to reflect on the past and where some of these, where some of the traditions and stories may have come from. Go back to the 1600s. The Spaniards actually went to Latin America and discovered tomatoes. They were not red tomatoes. They were yellow and orange, and they were gold colored. So when they brought them back to the Mediterranean, to Spain and Italy, they didn't call them red. They looked like apples, right? Tomato kind of almost approximates an apple. They called them golden apples, pom apple, d'oro, pomodoro, right? Italian for tomato. And they called them golden apples. Okay. And later on, they were bred to be red and beautiful and beefy. Okay. In the beginning, the people who were in the Mediterranean who received tomatoes, and they were the fruits on a vine, and the Europeans hadn't seen this plant before. They were curious what plant it was, so they sent a clipping of the vine up to Oxford in England to the scholars that were there studying it. So, and the scholars that were looking at the plants were like, we haven't seen this before. This leaf looked really unusual. And they tried to match it to other leaves. Closest leaf it actually looked like was the nightshade. And so they basically wrote back to say, I think it's related to the nightshade. All right. That's the link. Okay. There's a lot of nightshades out there. They all look the same. They're not all poisonous. Okay. Now, nightshade itself is poisonous, but even a poisonous nightshade is used, like the belladonna plant is actually used medically to treat diseases. Like atropine comes from the nightshade plant. So again, we don't fear it. We understand it. Now, back to the tomato. Only wealthy people in the beginning could actually have these beautiful gifts from Latin America, these tomatoes. And what they did is they used them as objets d'art to display their influence and their wealth. So they took these tomatoes and they put them on lead pewter trays. Okay. Now, what's in a tomato? It's got acid in it. What does the acid do to the pewter and the lead? It sucks up the lead. And so now the tomatoes from these trays actually became lead poisoners. All right. And so then when they started eating the tomatoes, they got lead poisoning. And that's how they actually associated the tomato with toxicity with the nightshades. And this is a little bit of history a lot of people don't know about. So what do? Well, the wealthy people threw the tomatoes out the window. And where did they land? They landed at the feet of the peasants. Peasants don't have fancy pewter lead trays. They just planted them in the ground. The tomatoes grew up. No lead, no pewter. Eat the tomato. They had no problems. And that's why tomato sauce, sugo in Italian, for example, is a peasant food. It comes from simple people. They never feared the poor people never feared tomatoes. All right. So I'll stop there, but just to let you know that there's a context to all this. And there are lectins in tomatoes. None of them are toxic.
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
So while it's very important to know how to choose the right foods, it's equally important to know what foods we want to be cautious of, wary, and cut down or cut out or avoid altogether. We're feeding our gut bacteria.